For this next lesson, I want to talk about triads for a little bit. I've decided the theme with these lessons is going to be things that I feel in my own playing needed to be reevaluated and looked at again, and it's turned out that they've all been real fundamental kind of stuff. And triads for sure is one of those things. When I was coming up in school, first trying to play jazz, I don't remember triads being discussed very often when I was in college. It was mainly all about seventh chords, extensions, altered tones, stuff like that. And triads, to me it was kind of just assumed that you knew triads on your instrument, and so they never really discussed them. Nowadays that they may be being addressed more because I hear so much of the modern guys using triads extensively in their improvisations and their compositions and stuff like that. So it may be more discussed in university settings nowadays, but when I was in school, I don't remember it being discussed very often, and so therefore it was kind of neglected in my playing. And only, in recent years, after hearing modern guys using them so much, did I think, oh, I need to go back and relearn my triads and try to reincorporate them into my playing and my practice regimen. So that's one of the things I want to talk about in these lessons. And what I'm going to do in this one is first give you some examples of how the modern guys are using the triads, and what they're doing is a lot of the times is superimposing them over given harmonies. So I'll give you some examples of that, and then I'll just talk about how to practice triads on your instrument. So let's give some superimposition examples first, and I'm only going to give major, minor, and augmented triads. There's also diminished triads, but I don't necessarily hear those being superimposed as extensively as major, minor, and augmented. So I'm just going to give you some of those first. Let's start with a few major ones. One of the ones I hear being used very frequently is off of the second on a major chord. So what I'm going to do is play the chord on keyboard and then play the superimposed triad on guitar. Forgive my keyboard piano playing skills. I'll keep everything in C just to keep it simple. So if you got C major 7 as the underlying harmony, you play D triad off of the second. And that's giving you the extensions on C major 7th, D the 9th, F sharp, the sharp 11, and A the 13th. Very cool sound that I hear a lot of players using. Another one I hear is off of the tritone. So if you're, normally over a dominant chord. So if you got C7 in the harmony, superimpose F sharp major triad. And that's a very cool sound. To me, that's coming out of the diminished scale, the half-whole diminished scale. So if you're thinking C and then half-whole diminished on C7, you can play really any of those triads going up in minor thirds. C major, E flat major, F sharp major, which I just played, or A major, and any of those work. The last major one I want to give you is off of the 5th, and it's typically on a minor chord, but you can do it on a major chord too. But I typically hear it on a minor chord. So if you got C minor, G major triad. And that's giving you, with the 5th, G, B, which is the minor, or the major 7th on a minor chord. So that's giving you that kind of minor major 7th sound, and D, the 9th. Very cool sound that I hear a lot of guys doing. Let's talk about some minor triad superimpositions. First one is just your basic on C major or C6, A minor. That's a real common one. That was used back in the swing era, so that's been used throughout jazz history. I've heard that being used. Another one is again off of the second scale degree. If you've got a minor chord, C minor, D minor triad. And again, that's giving you the extensions on C minor. D the 9th, F the 11th, A the 13th. The last minor one is off of the 5th again, but I typically hear it being on a minor chord. So if you got C minor 7, G minor triad. And that's a very nice sound that I hear a lot of guys using. Let me give you some augmented ones. The first one is just your standard on a dominant, C7, just C augmented triad. And that's, just giving you that basic flat 13 or sharp 5 on a dominant. You can also play on C7, B flat B flat augmented triad. That's kind of giving you that sharp 11 whole tone kind of a sound, because you got B flat, the flat 7, F sharp, the sharp 11, D, the 9th, kind of that sharp 11 whole tone sound on a dominant chord. Another cool one you can play on a dominant C7 is off of D flat augmented triad. That's kind of giving you that sus flat 9 sound, because you got D flat, the flat 9, A, the 13th, and F, the 11th. So that's sus flat 9 kind of a sound on a dominant, which is very cool. So there's some typical examples of superimposing triads over given harmonies, and obviously there's endless combinations. I'm just giving you the few that I hear being used a lot. You can come up with your own or get some books and check out some other ones. Another common thing I hear being used is triad pairs, where you take two triads and kind of weave them together over given harmonies. So again, if you got a C dominant, a typical one is C and B flat triad together. That's a very cool sound. You can also play those as a scale, put all those notes together in a scale. So if you got B flat and C major triad, B flat, D, F, C, E, G as a scale. That's a 6-note scale or a hexatonic scale. Jerry Bergonzi, saxophonist, has a book out called Hexatonics, and it's all about that stuff. Very interesting stuff. Obviously, with triad pairs, there's endless combinations of the two triads that you put together, and endless combinations of what chords or harmony you can superimpose them over. I think the only rule you have to follow is that the two triads that you're pairing together can't have any common tones. They have to each have separate tones. So B flat, D, F, C, E, G for that particular one, but obviously endless combinations. So that's another example, and I hear a lot of modern guys using that triad pairs in modern jazz. So there's some examples. Now I'm going to give you some, some practice tips and, ways that I practice them. Obviously, I arpeggiate them like that, like I've been showing you. I also kind of practice them in groups of 4. Groups of 3 or triplets. Or just like that, kind of up and down each one. There's endless combinations you can do. Those are just some of the ways I practice them. Once you get them like that, the goal is to just get all of your major, minor, and augmented triads down on your instrument from the lowest note to the highest note. So on guitar, for guitar players, that's, it's not an easy task because there's so many different positions you have to learn each one in. And, they don't necessarily lie very easily on guitar. There's a lot of barring and stuff involved. But the goal is to get it where you're like a saxophonist or a pianist, where you can just seamlessly go from the lowest note to the highest note and back down on any given major, minor, or augmented triad. So if I was to say C major triad, B flat minor triad. Obviously a lot faster and a lot more seamless than that, but that's the goal, is to be able to just, any given triad, when you come across it, you can instantly play it from the lowest to the highest note on your instrument. So that's, the goal. Once you get the arpeggios and stuff down, you can practice them in scales, with leading tones. So on and so forth, those kind of a ways, but I would just get the arpeggios down first and then start doing different kinds of stuff with them. Also, for guitar players specifically, practice the chord voicings on, for the triads. Like say you got A major triad, and the inversions on each string set. And then for minor, so on and so forth. There's also, for guitar players, spread triads or open triads, where you take, if you take an A major again, you take the second voice and move the second voice up an octave. And you get these nice spread voicings on guitar, which you can move up the inversions. And then practice those on each string set. For minor too, for augmented as well. Luckily augmented is symmetrical, so you're not learning as many different voicings or grips for each one. But those are just some ways instrumentalists and guitar players can practice them. So I highly recommend revisit your triads on your instrument. It's good.